Hello everyone, this is Andrew. Welcome to Keen on America. On July 4th, 2026, America will be 250 years old. An anniversary that will, no doubt, be greeted with a mixture of celebration, contemplation, and resignation. In Keen on America, we talk to prominent US citizens not just about their country's past and present, but also about its future. What, I ask my American guests, will be the 21st century fate of their now venerable republic? Hello everybody, welcome back to Keen on America. We're continuing themes today. Yesterday, we were in Virginia talking regenerative farming with Joel Salatin. Today, we are in Houston, Texas, talking about a different kind of farming with my guest, Kimberly Meyer, the author of Accidental Sisters, Refugee Women Struggling Together for a New American Dream. And as always on Keen on America, I began by asking Kimberly Myers where in America she was born.
My name is Kimberly Meyer. I was born in St. Joseph, Missouri. And I live now in Houston, Texas.
Kim, do you believe in something called the American dream?
I believe we have a mythology around the American dream. And yeah, I believe that there is a thing called the American dream.
Sounds a bit cheesy, but you've just written a book collecting the vision of American dreams of a number of immigrant women. The book is Accidental Sisters, Refugee Women Struggling Together for a New American Dream. Tell me about the book and the centrality of this quote-unquote new American dream in the vision of the refugee women you've worked with on the book.
Well, I think the mythology that the book is trying to revise or critique is the idea that in America you come here and you pull up your bootstraps and you work really hard all by yourself and through your own individual struggles, that you then, in working really hard, you have a house in the suburbs and a car in the driveway, and you can buy the things that you want. And I think that's an empty and hollow dream, and also profoundly unrealistic. And so the book, which is a collection of stories, of interrelated stories of women, single mother refugees who came here and were part of a program overseen by a woman who was herself formerly a single mother refugee from Iraq. This collection of interrelated stories is pushing against that notion by listening really deeply to these women and what they're saying and the way that they're living and the cultures that they come from that are deeply interconnected and dependent on each other. That human beings rely on each other, and that we need each other collectively to create a flourishing community and a flourishing life. And that's the American dream we should be striving for.
So are you suggesting that the women that you work with on this book, Accidental Sisters, are offering an American dream that's more realistic, more viable in the 21st century?
Yes. I think that the problems that we face, these systemic problems that we face, that this notion of the lone frontiersman out on the edge of civilization, pushing out, colonizing other people's lands. That this kind of dream and vision is not sustainable in the face of the enormous problems and catastrophes that we're staring that we're facing.
But let's be clear, Kim, you and I are in Houston. We spent the morning at the farm where a number of the women worked. I talked to some of them. They're all great fans of, if not the American dream, certainly America itself. Yeah. So we should be clear that the book and the women that you've written about, they're not in any way hostile to the promise of America. Is that fair?
I think that's very fair. I think that there's a complexity, though, that we should look at, we should talk about, which is that the conversations that I had with these women, which were during the first year or so that after they arrived here, the positions that they were in those early days as newly resettled refugees who actually had been through the refugee resettlement program and had failed to become what's called self-sufficient, what's required of them because of the refugee resettlement system. They are required to become self-sufficient. They had not become self-sufficient, economically self-sufficient, and so they were then, they found their way, or they were kind of invited into this program which gives the book the structure. I'm following Alia, who's in charge of the program, and the women that she's relating to and trying to help because they've fallen through the cracks of the refugee resettlement program. So I'm forgetting where I'm going. So those early days and those early those conversations that I had with them throughout that year, it's not that they were ever critical of the United States. They were very grateful for the refuge that it gave them, and the safety that it provided their families. But what they were struggling with, economically, with healthcare, just trying to put food on the table. It was very, very difficult for them. It was, as another refugee told me, and just another trauma. You know, that the first trauma is the trauma of displacement and becoming a refugee, but then there's this second trauma, this other trauma of resettlement itself. So I think in the space between those conversations and that year that I was following them, and now there's a nuance. I think that they always were grateful for this country, but also just astonished at how difficult it was to just survive here. And now I think they've gotten their footing, and certainly at the farm there is this community that they're a part of, that gives them the sense of belonging that they did not feel in those early days when they were profoundly isolated.
We're speaking, as I said earlier, in Houston, Texas. The coastal centers, places like Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, there are those, of course, who look down on Texas and think it a place of great intolerance, particularly towards people of different skins, immigrants. But my sense, having spent the morning, Kim, on the farm and speaking to some of the women there, is that actually isn't true of a place like Houston. And I've spent a few days here. It's a very vibrant place, a very open place. In some ways, more culturally varied than places like New York and San Francisco. Is that fair?
Well, it's not only fair, it's true. And it's documented. There's a researcher, he's not actually at the Kinder Institute at Rice University anymore. He's retired, but Dr. Stephen Kleinberg has done these demographic studies over many years, and by his measures, Houston is the most diverse city in the nation. But the friendliness that you're talking about, I think that comes from that diversity and from so many people being here from so many other places. Houston and the major cities, and this is true across the country, they're not representative of Texas as a whole, or the picture that people have of Texas as a whole. I'm not sure I answered that question, but.
Kim, what does this book and your experience with the immigrant women and indeed the openness of Houston, what can it teach us in 2024 in an America where some people are warning of civil war? There seems to be increasing discord, political discord between right and left, between Democrats and Republicans, between the coast and the hinterland. What can we learn from your book, from the experience of these women who of course came from places like Congo, which were unfortunately theaters of horrible civil war? How can America learn, if not to come together, which might be rather idealistic and unrealistic, but what can we learn about rebuilding America in the 21st century?
Yeah, I think that the example of the refugee women, the immigrant community here, and then just the way Houstonians kind of relate to each other, it is a good model for the country. And I think what unites us as people in the city, and I don't want to overstate that. I'm sure there are these tensions, that there are tensions that exist, but I think people just are focused, and the women that I speak with in the book and I follow in the book, like they're focused on the things that matter to all of us. They're the things that we all care about, that we have a safe place for our children to grow up, that we have a good school for them to go to, and that we have food that we can feed them, and access to we have access to healthcare. Those problems aren't all solved here in Houston, but I think that they teach us to just I'm sorry, Andrew. I feel like I'm really flubbing this answer. I hope that you can edit this out.
Yeah, well,
I don't feel confident in this answer at all. I feel like I'm just speaking in like platitudes, and this is not how I want to answer this question. Like what I really want to say about what I think we can learn from these women is just the way that they offer each other this sense of connection and community, that they reach out their hands to each other in these circumstances where they need help. They're offering economic help and just a place to feel connected and together, and that this sort of sisterhood that I saw again and again in the relationships that the women were forming with each other, that they would take care of each other's children, that they would cook for each other, that they would step in the places where the systems around them were failing, that this is something I think we need to pay attention to, and this is the wisdom that they have around the way that we need to be connected to each other.
Tell me about the farm, Kim. We spent the morning at this farm. It was a hot morning, but clearly there's a remarkable industriousness. It's not really a large farm. It's more like a community garden opposite a school on the outskirts of Houston. Is this the place that brought these immigrant women together?
The farm grew out of Alikia's story. Alikia comes from Congo and was a farmer there, and she when I met her, she was living in, and she still is living in public housing, government housing, and she had a teeny tiny little patch of a garden in front of her stoop, and I didn't know any of the plants that were planted in this garden. And so over time, I had her tell me about the things that she was growing, which were things that she had carried with her from home, from Africa. And she had even been growing in the refugee camp in Burundi. All of this is part of the book. This is part of her long story of coming here. And so I was very moved by the idea of her bringing these seeds, because she needed to grow the things that she knew from home that gave her comfort and that fed her body. And so over time, the idea for this farm evolved in relationship with her, and then in relationship with some other refugee farmers that I know here through an organization called Plant It Forward. And so with Elikia and then a women's empowerment group for Congolese refugee women, this community farm idea took hold, and we were eventually pointed towards A-Leaf Independent School District land, so we're on school district land, and we cultivate about an acre of land, and part of that is farmed collectively, and part of it is farmed individually, with the women each having their own plots where they're growing food just for their families, and then collectively we're growing food that we sell at markets and that gets distributed throughout the city. So it doesn't look very big, but we are now feeding way beyond the community that started it.
Is there a regenerative quality to the farm? It's built on regenerative agricultural principles, but is it more broadly regenerative, not just in its technical approach to farming, but in the idea of the farm?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And it points to the heart of the farm. We say at the farm that our mission is to feed bodies and souls. And for me, that's not necessarily defined in a religious sense, but that, like I was saying, people come here traumatized. They come here having suffered horrific torture in some cases, sexual trauma. They've lost everything, and they come here and they come to the farm and they work the soil. They plant a seed. They plant seeds, and it becomes food, and that act is hopeful, and it is regenerative of people's spirits, and we see it every single day, and we see it beyond just the community that has started the farm, that we see it when people wander onto the farm or they come as volunteers and they talk about their grandfather's farm in India or their mother's garden in the backyard of their apartment, and the garden that she used to have in Vietnam. They talk about the way that coming to the farm reminds them of these things and kind of regenerates their spirits that way too, and it reconnects us all to the natural world in a part of the city that's filled with that's covered in concrete. So I think in so many ways it's doing this regenerative work and reconnective work.
What about the soil? Is the heart of the farm itself, the regeneration of the soil, a reaction against industrial farming?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, regenerative agriculture it is a reaction to the problems that have emerged, that have become clear with big ag. But yeah, the focus in regenerative agriculture is on the soil itself, that you're trying to create this rich and diverse microorganism life underneath in the soil itself, that's what you're feeding, is all of that life that you can't see beneath the soil. And so everything that we're doing is trying to feed that soil. We started that land that we're farming on, when we originally tilled it to try to just open it up and to prepare it, was filled with, we pulled out tires, we pulled out chunks of concrete and rebar and like nasty, huge carpet. It had been some kind of dumping ground. So we pulled all that out, and little by little, with a lot of compost and a lot of other techniques that we're using, we are producing lots and lots of food, and nutrient dense food, because it's growing in this very rich, happy soil. So yeah, that's a very good question.
Is it a metaphor then, that regenerative farming for America itself, getting rid of the poison in the soil? What can we learn, maybe not quite literally, but metaphorically, about getting rid of that poison and beginning again?
In a way, you've just answered the question to yourself. Like I think that it. I think that the soil is poisoned by herbicides and pesticides. That's for sure. The land is barren too. That kind of it's lifeless. The soil is lifeless. And I think there are so many metaphors in farming and agriculture, but what you're trying to do in regenerative agriculture is bring life back to it. So, I think that people who want to clear out this country of immigrants and return it to something that was never existed anyway. That is a kind of I don't want to overstate or overwork the metaphor, but it is genocide and wiping away of people, getting rid of that diversity. Like we can't thrive. We can't thrive that way, and we need each other, and we need that diversity that exists underneath the soil that feeds us, and that feeds the plants that feed us, and then in that work together, we feed each other.
Kim, did you talk much to the immigrant women about this ongoing crisis of immigration in America? On the one hand, you have some people who believe in open borders. On the other hand, there are the Trumpians who seem to think that the border should be just shut indefinitely and a huge wall built. Realistically, there has to be something in between. What were their feelings when the conversation turned to American policy on immigration, particularly in Texas, which of course in many ways is ground zero for the crisis?
Yeah. I can't say that we had in-depth conversations about American immigration policy. I think it was much more like the stories are deeply personal and stretch back to their homelands, and then move into this period of their displacement, and then this attempt to resettle here. So to the extent that we talked about immigration policy, it was how it was affecting their personal lives and keeping their families from coming here, being reconnected with their families. Remember, I was following them in 2018, so this is the height of the Trump years, and refugee resettlement was basically shut down during those years. And if he's reelected, we had some friends over last night who had been in refugee resettlement for years themselves. I mean, it's effectively over. And so the women and the way that they understood, or that they understood immigration policy is much more, is just deeply personal to them. Family members that were stuck in this bureaucracy of trying to through the family reunification program, which was being shut down, that they couldn't be reunified with their families. There was the crisis at the border, and family separation at the border that was in full force during the time of the work of the book. But they were also experiencing this other kind of family separation through the Muslim ban that had been in place, and just the shutting down of the refugee resettlement program. So I think that's how they understand immigration, it was all through that filter.
Did you talk much to them about luck in their lives? On the one hand, of course, they've had the bad luck of having to become refugees, of leaving the place where they were born, mostly through war or conflict. On the other hand, they've had a great deal of luck in being amongst a small minority of people who want to come to America and have, for one reason or other, come and set up lives here. Do they think of themselves as lucky? There's a couple moments that are coming back to me from the book that somewhat speak to this question. So Alia, who is the main figure in the book, who I'm following, she's originally from Iraq. She was part of the power structure in Iraq under Saddam Hussein. Her husband was a pilot in the Iraqi Air Force, and after the American invasion in 2002, she and the years after that, when Iraq was in chaos because of the invasion, her husband was murdered, sitting beside her in a car as they were trying to seek some safety in the northern part of the country. And so she came here with her 3 children as a single mother after fleeing first to Jordan and becoming a refugee. And so there's one moment in the book, Andrew, and I know this isn't exactly what you're asking when you're talking about luck, but I'll tell you about this moment, then I'll tell you about another moment with her. So she tells this story about being in Jordan and talking to some friends there that she had reconnected with, and her husband's body eventually was returned to her. To her family. They were able to recover his body, but many people never were given their dear ones' bodies back to bury. So she was able to bury her husband's body, and she was having this conversation about this with friends in Jordan, and they told her, "You're lucky that you had this body to bury." And as we were talking, she was just thinking about this and just saying, basically pointing out the irony of the fact that she was lucky that she had a body to bury, that constituted luck to her. And then I think about another moment with her where she talked, and this is after many years of having been a refugee and kind of come to terms with her position, and then found this work in helping other refugee women in the organization that had rescued her. And she talks about how she actually considers herself lucky from the loss that she experienced and the position that she occupied in Iraq, which was at the pinnacle of the Iraqi elite, and brought down to the lowest possible status, a single mother refugee with nothing, and how through that process she sees that she's become
what she says more in the book, she's become more human. She's become human. That she now understands other people's suffering in a way that she could never have understood it in Iraq, and that she thrives on this diversity in this city and in this place that she's come to, where before she considered herself kind of an elitist and I don't know that she would have used exactly this word, but kind of a racist. And so now she does consider herself lucky. I know that's a little bit different than the angle that I think you were asking about, but those are the things that come back to me when I think about luck and the kind of conversations that I had with women here.
And what does it teach you, the writing of the book, about policy on immigration? Open borders aren't, I mean, in my view at least, they don't seem to be realistic. Most Americans don't want open borders. How should Americans determine who becomes American citizens and who don't?
Well, as Ilhan Omar says in the foreword of the book, that I think all immigration policy needs to start with an understanding of the stories of the human beings who are coming here. And if we can begin there, which is what this book is trying to lay out, and really understand each other and understand them and what they've been through, and that they are like us, and they have they have the same desires, these just deeply human desires. If we can understand that and understand the stories, then I think that we can treat each other with more humanity.
But doesn't that make it even more difficult if we know about all these people's stories? Everyone's story is heartbreaking. Everyone who wants to come to America has one kind of good narrative, convincing narrative. It's all about human dignity. Doesn't that make it even harder to say no to the majority of people who want to come?
Yeah, I mean, I don't consider myself an expert in immigration policy. I consider myself a documentarian of human stories, and so my focus in the book is on a very particular part of immigration policy, which is refugee resettlement. And it is this very short period of time that we give those human beings that we have invited into our country, and we have cleared through a laborious process, that we force them into we force them in 3 to 4 months to become economically self-sufficient, and it is impossible what we're asking of them. And so my focus in the book is really on a very small part, and some ideas around that, and around expanding that time so that people can become more proficient at English and use the skills that they actually come with, so that we're not wasting all of this human potential that they bring with them. And I don't think that the book's focus and my focus is not on immigration policy in general, and I don't feel like very qualified to answer those questions, but on refugee resettlement policy, this I think that we can attend more carefully to.
Final question, Kim. America's going to be 250 years old in 2026, in a couple of years. Are you going to be celebrating? Can we imagine a new American dream in the 21st century that reflects some of the ideals, the promises, and the experiences of the women you write about in your book?
I mean, the women in this book make me very hopeful about this country. The work that I do at the farm makes me very hopeful for this country, because I see more in those communities, those immigrant and refugee communities, an understanding of the necessity to work as a collective. And I think that it's in those communities that we can find a way forward together, instead of these old, outdated ideas around independence and self-sufficiency that have always been mythologies, but I just think that they're not sustainable in the face of what we're facing. And I think a lot about this kind of motto that we have at the farm, and that Alicia taught us all, and that is a phrase in Swahili, umoja ni nguvu, and it means that we're stronger together. And I just think that if we can listen and take those lessons to heart, that our country at age 250 and beyond might be headed in a better direction.
So if America can understand and embrace the ideal of being stronger together, maybe a communitarian ideal over the next 50 years, then if we're having this conversation in 50 years' time, you'll be a little bit more optimistic, and most people will be more optimistic about the future of the country.
Yeah, that's right. Not to introduce something, but we face even bigger challenges with climate change, or climate catastrophe. If we don't work as a collective and at the local level, and then outward from there, then I don't know. I worry a lot about that, but I think that it all. Let me just say that that I have found for myself that this small local work in community with other human beings, if those kind of cells across the country could somehow, little by little, grow and knit themselves together, and that we could see that kind of work is the way that leads to flourishing for all human beings, that in 50 years, I think that our country would be much, much stronger.